Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, MDA and guests, for taking time to learn more about ZOLGENSMA. It's already December 2020. Next slide. My name is Wendy Warlamont. I'm a registered nurse and a patient resource manager with Novartis Gene Therapies. Today I will be talking to you about our company, Novartis Gene Therapies, show you a video on how ZOLGENSMA works, and discuss available resources. Renee Bomar, our Regional Medical Director and Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, will be presenting on results from the date of the clinical trials and, more important, safety information you should know about ZOLGENSMA. Next slide. Just to let you know, Avexis is now Gene Therapies. Although our organization's name has changed, our commitment to you, patients, and their families, and the SMA community remains steadfast. We're proud to be part of the SMA community, the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and the groundbreaking advancements in treatment, including our initial gene therapy. We will continue to focus on research, development, manufacturing, and commercialization of innovative gene therapies targeting rare and devastating diseases. ZOLGENSMA is approved in the US, Japan, Brazil, and the EU, currently pursuing registration in nearly 36 countries, including Switzerland, Canada, Israel, and Australia. The progress in gene therapy for SMA is helping lead the way for gene therapy in other disease states, including those in the Novartis Gene Therapy pipeline for Rett syndrome and Friedreich's ataxia. Next slide. So let's talk about and look closely about ZOLGENSMA. We'll look at children treated with ZOLGENSMA, ZOLGENSMA updates, and how ZOLGENSMA works, and more important, safety information. So what about ZOLGENSMA? ZOLGENSMA is a prescription gene therapy, FDA approved to treat children less than 2 years of age with spinal muscular atrophy. ZOLGENSMA is given as a one-time infusion. It's given by IV over 60 minutes. It has not been evaluated in patients with advanced SMA, and ZOLGENSMA has no SMA type or copy number restrictions. With important safety information, ZOLGENSMA can cause acute serious liver injury. Liver enzymes could become elevated and may reflect acute serious liver injury in children who receive ZOLGENSMA. Patients will receive an oral corticosteroid before and after infusion with ZOLGENSMA and will undergo regular blood tests to monitor their liver function. Please contact your doctor immediately if the patient's skin or the whites of their eyes appear yellowish, or if the patient misses a dose of the corticosteroid or vomits it up. And please, amidst the current COVID pandemic, be sure to discuss any treatment site questions or concerns with your prescriber. It's important to note the need for SMA treatment is urgent and should not be delayed. So now let's watch the video on children treated with ZOLGENSMA. ZOLGENSMA updates. ZOLGENSMA has been approved for more than a year. As of August 2020, more than 700 children have been treated with ZOLGENSMA globally, including our clinical trials, commercially, and through managed access programs. Next, we will watch a video on how ZOLGENSMA works. Then after, Renee Bomar will go over the clinical studies and safety updates.
dedicated team of scientists has developed a targeted approach for treating spinal muscular atrophy using a one-time-only gene therapy called ZOLGENSMA, onasemnogene apaparvovec XIOI. Gene therapy targets the genetic root cause of spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, by replacing the function of the non-working or missing gene that causes SMA, called the survival motor neuron 1 gene, or SMN1 gene. The SMN1 gene is very important because it's the body's main source for making SMN protein. SMN protein is used throughout the body, and it is essential to motor neuron cell survival. Motor neuron cells are responsible for communicating with the muscles and telling them to work properly. In addition to the SMN1 gene, the body also has a backup gene called the SMN2 gene. People can have one or more copies of this backup gene. In a person with SMA, the SMN1 gene is not working properly or is missing, and SMN protein cannot be made by the SMN1 gene. This is extremely serious because the SMN1 gene typically makes most of the SMN protein your body needs. When the SMN1 gene cannot make SMN protein, the body relies on the SMN2 backup genes for this. Unfortunately, the SMN2 gene makes only about 10% of working protein compared to the protein produced by the SMN1 gene. That means that people with fewer SMN2 copies won't make enough SMN protein. The severity of SMA is related to the number of copies of the SMN2 gene. SMA type 1 is the most common type of SMA and is very serious. Individuals with SMA type 1 typically have only 2 SMN2 backup genes. Without enough SMN protein, motor neuron cells become weaker and weaker and eventually stop working, lose all function, and die. As a result, muscles can become so weak that eating, breathing, and moving become difficult, and the disease becomes life-threatening. Let's learn how ZOLGENSMA works to treat SMA. It has 2 parts, a gene and a vector, and is made in a laboratory by scientists. First, let's focus on the gene. It's a new working copy of a human SMN gene that replaces the function of the non-working or missing SMN1 gene to restore SMN protein production in the motor neuron cells. Now, let's look at the vector. The vector used by ZOLGENSMA is made from a virus called adeno-associated virus 9, or AAV9. This type of virus does not make people sick. To make the vector, the DNA of the virus is removed. With the DNA gone, the fully functional SMN gene is placed inside the vector. The reason why ZOLGENSMA uses vectors to deliver the new genes is because they can travel quickly throughout the body to the motor neuron cells. But how does ZOLGENSMA work? Once inside the body, the vectors deliver new working copies of SMN genes to the motor neuron cells. ZOLGENSMA sits inside the nucleus of the motor neuron cell and does not become part of the child's DNA. Then, the new genes tell the motor neuron cells to start making SMN protein. This process happens repeatedly throughout the body, with many vectors delivering new SMN genes to motor neuron cells so that SMN protein can be made in those cells. Once the genes reach their destination, the vectors are broken down and excreted from the body. ZOLGENSMA, changing the future of SMA treatment. Indication and important safety information. ZOLGENSMA is a prescription gene therapy used to treat children less than 2 years old with spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. ZOLGENSMA is given as a one-time infusion into a vein. ZOLGENSMA was not evaluated in patients with advanced SMA. ZOLGENSMA can cause acute serious liver injury. Liver enzymes could become elevated and may reflect acute serious liver injury in children who receive ZOLGENSMA. Patients will receive an oral corticosteroid before and after infusion with ZOLGENSMA and will undergo regular blood tests to monitor liver function. Contact the patient's doctor immediately if the patient's skin and/or whites of the eyes appear yellowish, or if the patient misses a dose of the corticosteroid or vomits it up. Viral respiratory infections before or after ZOLGENSMA infusion can lead to more serious complications. Contact the patient's doctor immediately if you see signs of a possible viral respiratory infection such as coughing, wheezing, sneezing, runny nose, sore throat, or fever. Decreased platelet counts could occur following infusion with ZOLGENSMA. Seek immediate medical attention if a patient experiences unexpected bleeding or bruising. Talk with the patient's doctor to decide if adjustments to the vaccination schedule are needed to accommodate treatment with a corticosteroid. Protection against respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, is recommended. Temporarily, small amounts of Zolgensma may be found in the patient's stool. Use good hand hygiene when coming into direct contact with bodily waste for 1 month after infusion with Zolgensma. Disposable diapers should be sealed in disposable trash bags and thrown out with regular trash. The most common side effects that occurred in patients treated with Zolgensma were elevated liver enzymes and vomiting. The safety information provided here is not comprehensive. Talk to the patient's doctor about any side effects that bother the patient or that don't go away. You are encouraged to report suspected side effects by contacting the FDA or Avexis. Please see the full prescribing information at zolgensma.com.
I hope you enjoyed that video. My name is Renee Bomar, and I'm the Regional Medical Director in the Southeast for Novartis Gene Therapies. We're going to take a look at some clinical studies updates, and specifically looking at our STRIVE US and START studies, which are 2 completed studies. We also have ongoing studies of START and SPRINT. So next slide. The efficacy and safety of this one-time IV dose of Zolgensma has been evaluated in 3 clinical studies and 1 observational long-term follow-up study. We have 2 categories of studies, symptomatic SMA and pre-symptomatic SMA. Our symptomatic SMA studies include STRIVE US, which looks at patients with symptomatic SMA type 1, the START study, which was our first study looking at patients with symptomatic SMA type 1, and then an ongoing START long-term follow-up study that is a 15-year follow-up study of the patients from the START study who enrolled into the follow-up study. There's also a pre-symptomatic SMA study called SPRINT, and these are patients who were pre-symptomatic who had 2 or 3 SMN2 backup copies. Next slide. About our STRIVE US study. The patients in this study were under 6 months of age at the time of infusion. There were 22 patients who were enrolled, and the average age of dosing was 3.7 months. Children in the study were followed through 18 months of age at the study visit. That was the end of the study. And we looked at 5 key measurements. The first was event-free survival at 14 months of age, sitting without assistance for 30 seconds or more at the 18-month of age study visit, the ability to thrive at 18 months of age, independence from breathing or feeding support, and change in motor function over time. Next slide. What we found in this study, and this is a brief overview, we looked at increased event-free survival at 14 months of age and at 18 months of age. 91% or 20 of the 22 babies were alive and did not need any permanent breathing support. 1 infant passed away at 7.8 months of age from causes unrelated to treatment, and 1 patient withdrew from the study at 11.9 months of age and was requiring permanent ventilation at 11 months of age before withdrawing from the study. 1 patient withdrew from the study at 18 months of age before the 18-month study visit due to an adverse event of respiratory distress that was unrelated to treatment. We also looked at achieved motor milestones. 13 of the 22 infants, or 59%, could sit without support for 30 seconds or more at the 18-month of age study visit. And when we looked at the ability to thrive, as well as to be free of respiratory support, we found that 68% of the patients did not need any respiratory support, and 41%, or 9 of the 22, met all 3 components of the ability to thrive. When we talk about ability to thrive, we're talking about the ability to swallow thin liquids, being free of non-oral feeding support, and maintaining a weight that is consistent with the patient's age. Next slide. The START study was the first study that was done. This study was looking at infants who were symptomatic, who had SMA type 1, who were under 9 months of age. There were 15 patients enrolled into the study, and they were split into two groups. Group 1 included 3 patients who received a low dose of the study drug, and Group 2, 12 patients, received a high dose of the study drug. Part of the purpose of the START study was to determine the appropriate dose of ZOLGENSMA. What the study was looking at, these babies were followed for 24 months after treatment, and the study looked at 4 key measurements: the assessment of safety, event-free survival, which is considered to be the absence of death or permanent ventilation at 24 months after infusion. We looked at CHOP and TEND score as a means of assessing motor milestones, as well as the achievement of motor milestones. As I mentioned, there was a long-term follow-up study as part of the START study. 13 patients from the START study chose to enroll in the long-term follow-up study, which looks at safety monitoring for 15 years. Next slide. The START summary for Group 2 is as follows, and Group 2 was the 12 patients who received the higher dose. Survival without breathing support. At 24 months after infusion, 12 of the 12, or 100% of these patients were alive and did not need any permanent breathing support. 11 of the 12 patients could sit without support for at least 5 seconds, and 9 of the 12 patients in this cohort were able to sit without support for at least 30 seconds. 92% of the patients, or 11 of the 12, could speak and swallow and were receiving partial oral feeding. And 6 of the 7 patients who did not require any nutritional support at the start of the study did not need nutritional support at the end of the study. Next slide. We'll look at a safety update of the most common side effects reported with ZOLGENSMA. ZOLGENSMA has an established safety profile demonstrated in these 3 clinical studies, as well as the 1 observational long-term follow-up study. There have been 44 patients treated with ZOLGENSMA who ranged in age from 0.3 months to 7.9 months at the time of infusion in our clinical studies. And you can see the breakdown of the different patient characteristics. The START study patients were symptomatic. There were 15 patients enrolled in this study. This trial is completed. STRIVE US, which is a phase 3 study, patients were also symptomatic in this study. There were 22 patients enrolled, and this study is completed. And the SPRINT study, which is also a phase 3 study, is looking at pre-symptomatic infants. There, at the time of this data cut, there were 7 patients enrolled in the study, and this is an ongoing study with enrollment complete, but data continues to be collected. The most common side effects that occurred in patients treated with ZOLGENSMA were elevated liver enzymes and vomiting. Next slide. As of December of 2019, 100 patients have received ZOLGENSMA through our IV clinical study program. The most frequent reported events were elevated liver enzymes and vomiting, yet in our post-marketing experience, there have been reports of pyrexia, which is fever. Those have been common, and they're then spontaneously reported, as well as reported in the literature. Additional safety data continues to be collected. Next slide. I'm going to turn this back over to Wendy to talk to us about available resources.
Well, we have a great program. One of our resources is our One Gene program, and that includes people like myself, which are patient resource managers, and our extended team. One of our other great resources, which you've seen some videos from, is ZOLGENSMA.com, which also includes more videos and educational materials. Next slide. So the One Gene program is a dedicated resource for the SMA families throughout the ZOLGENSMA treatment journey. It is a team of highly trained and dedicated people who ensure that every family has the support they need during their treatment journey with ZOLGENSMA and beyond. Their work starts once the prescription form and/or the consent form has been received. And from that point forward, the team, the patient resource team, and the One Gene program works closely with the family to do everything from answering questions to being a reassuring voice when things might feel overwhelming. Next slide. So a patient resource manager is the main point of contact in behalf of the Novartis Gene Therapies. We help provide expert guidance and emotional support in every step of the way through your treatment journey, answering questions about Zolgensma. Patient resource manager can also help with treatment site logistics and may be available on the day of infusion. Next slide. The field reimbursement manager is also part of the One Gene extended family. They help the doctors navigate insurance requirements and authorizations. They have other support, includes their following the child's prescription through the insurance approvals, the pharmacy process, and the shipment journey to ensure that Zolgensma is delivered to the right place at the right time. There also is a case coordinator who acts as a go-between to connect the caregivers to their resources, and they may also assist the doctors with their insurance process. Some other support includes their benefits verification for insurance and coordination of financial assistance programs for eligible patients. To learn more, you may contact the One Gene program at 855-441-GENE, G-E-N-E, or 4363. They are available, the case coordinators, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. through 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And translation services are also available on request. Next slide. So our website houses helpful resources on many, many topics. And just to name a few, some things we've already looked at on how Zolgensma works, videos, clinical study results, steps to treatment, SMA disease state information, connecting the SMA community, and also something coming up soon is the SMA Atlas. So we're going to see a video on our family stories, and this is Maisie's story. It's an amazing video of a wonderful family.
Zolgensma is a prescription gene therapy used to treat children less than 2 years old with spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. Zolgensma can cause acute serious liver injury. Liver enzymes could become elevated and may reflect acute serious liver injury in children who receive Zolgensma.
My daughter Maisie has spinal muscular atrophy type 1. I knew something wasn't right with her. She wasn't moving her legs. She would just lay there. She got weaker and weaker, and she eventually just quit eating. The doctors, as much as we were begging them, were not recognizing that there was a valid issue. And so we took Maisie to our physical therapist who we trusted, and she encouraged us and helped advocate to get Maisie to Denver to seek additional testing.
We talked right away about how this might be something bigger, and so when she started having even more difficulties, when we said, yeah, it's probably time to get some more diagnostics. And that's when she went to Denver.
We got to the hospital. The genetic counselor came in, and she said, just so you know, we're testing for SMA. Obviously, we weren't sleeping very good. We spent hours researching SMA and what possibilities there were. When we received the diagnosis that Maisie had SMA, there were 2 options that we had found. One was FDA approved, and the other was in clinical trials, and that was Zolgensma. From the beginning, I wanted Zolgensma. We learned was that it was a gene therapy and that it was a one-time treatment. Maisie didn't qualify for the clinical trial, and so because we knew that they would continue to decline, and we started the treatment that had been FDA approved. That treatment, I could see that it had definitely improved her in some of her areas, and then she continued on that treatment, and it got her to Zolgensma. You know, it got her to the treatment date. The FDA approval for Zolgensma came May 24th, 2019, exactly 1 year from my trip to Denver. Even though Maisie had received another treatment, we still wanted Zolgensma because it's one-time therapy, and we continued to fight for it and continue to advocate.
Patients will receive an oral corticosteroid before and after infusion with Zolgensma. Contact the patient's doctor immediately if the patient's skin and/or whites of the eyes appear yellowish, or if the patient misses a dose of the corticosteroid or vomits it up.
I'll always remember the day Maisie received Zolgensma. It's 5 months post-dosing with Zolgensma. Maisie is 2 years old. She grabs her toes now and she sticks them in her mouth. She sits up and she only wants to sit up. And January 5th, 2020, Maisie said, "Mama, you want to go play?" Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I just held her and loved her and was like, "Yay, you said mama." I wasn't sure if I was ever going to hear that.
Seek immediate medical attention if a patient experiences unexpected bleeding or bruising. The most common side effects that occurred in patients treated with Zolgensma were elevated liver enzymes and vomiting.
Even though Maisie's received treatment, Maisie still has SMA. We start every day with CPT or chest physical therapy. She still requires a lot of her machines. Her cough assist is only twice a day. It forces air into her lungs and it expands her lungs and then it sucks it out like a strong cough. And then we suction. Maisie requires physical therapy 3 times a week, and then she also does speech therapy twice a week, and occupational therapy. That's not including the exercises and therapies we do at home. Maisie gets all of her nutrition through a feeding tube. However, we hope that someday she has the ability to eat, and we want her to be able to tolerate foods. I expected Zolgensma to stop the progression of the disease, just halt it, and no more getting weaker. And I had hoped that someday she might sit up and be able to see the world we do. She's laughing, she's talking, and she's hitting milestones that were once a dream. I think my little girl's gonna do things that I never even pictured that she would do.
Ask your doctor if Zolgensma is a treatment option for your child with SMA.
So simply put, our steps to treatment with Zolgensma, once the caregiver and the doctor have discussed our risk and benefits of Zolgensma and have chosen it as a treatment option, they will be able to go through these steps, find out if your child is eligible for treatment with Zolgensma, connect with our One Gene program, we'll prepare for the treatment day, and yay, the treatment day arrives, and then we'll discuss and you'll learn about after treatment care. Next slide. So there's multiple resources, which I talked about a little earlier, but they're all downloadable and you can print those out. So you want to go to zolgensma.com to look for those resources. There's Facts About SMA, which provides just simply easy to understand information about SMA. There's a Caregiver's Guide to Zolgensma, and that's designed to learn more about Zolgensma and SMA. There's also SMA After Treatment, which helps to understand how to manage other health needs after treatment, and then explaining SMA and Zolgensma for others. It's and other topics. Next slide. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, just mentioned it on the last couple slides, but SMA Atlas is coming soon. It's actually very exciting for you. Caregivers on the next chapter of their SMA journey may have many questions about what to expect after treatment. So the SMA Atlas offers videos, articles, and different stories that will help guide the caregiver along the way. You can also hear from other caregivers be inspired by their experiences, and receive valuable advice and tips that can be used today and down the road. It's the next chapter to answering questions on what to expect. Next slide. So, finally, to learn more, caregivers should talk to your doctor about Zolgensma and then go to ZOLGENSMA.com. We're working diligently to provide you with additional information and the latest updates about Zolgensma. If you have any questions about Zolgensma, talk to your doctor, or again, go to ZOLGENSMA.com. And in behalf of MDA and Novartis Gene Therapies, we'd like to thank you for attending today. The session is now ending. Thank you.